Hello and welcome to African Voices platform. My name is Baillor Jalloh. I've been let into the AVP studio for the first time in over 18 months, thanks to the easing of restrictions just a couple of weeks ago. On Thursday, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and President Uhuru Kenyatta co-hosted the Global Education Summit in London. The aim of the event was to raise over $5 billion United States dollars to support developing countries to fund quality education for poorer children, but also to try and reduce the gender disparity between boys and girls in developing countries. AVP spoke to various delegates to get an insight of the event.
It's a critical event on the global agenda and on the global political agenda. We are at an existential moment in education. That's because, really for two reasons. Before the pandemic, we saw that education was facing some serious challenges, 250 million children out of school, and 52% of the world's 10-year-olds not able to read a paragraph. And that number, of course, breaks down differently regionally. Then comes along the pandemic, and it threatens to set back a lot of the progress that had been made up until that point. And that's because schools had to close very quickly. We've lost a lot of learning globally. Many children may not ever return to school, particularly girls. We estimate that 20 million girls may never return to school. So we find ourselves at a moment where we have to lean into education. And today is really about financing. And we as a partnership, we're a huge partnership, look to raise money in many, many different ways, from international donors, from domestic resources, from partner governments, from philanthropic organizations, different ways of raising money. Today is a conference where all of our major donors and counterparties are coming together and saying, we're going to invest in education. And that will help set the trajectory for GPE's work for the next 5 years, and will hopefully give us the wherewithal to enable our partner countries to invest in education in a way that they can recover from the pandemic and get all of the most marginalized children in the world into school and learning, which is their right.
You spoke of being about over 20 million girls across the world that are not going to school, and that is really, really a huge number. And also, today's pledge is to raise about $5 billion in the next 5 years.
Yes.
And that is very, very vital. But speaking of that though, how realistic is today's project? And also we've seen so many heads of state, prime ministers pledging that they will invest more in education. But we've seen also the COVID-19 pandemic has kind of like affected the education system in many developing countries, likewise in the developed world. My question to you is, you as an organization, what are you going to do to make sure these global leaders that are here today, they fulfill their pledge?
Well, first of all, we've been in the process of the campaign for about 18 months, and we have been at it, working with every partner to make the case for education. And I think that what will happen after today is will have made an excellent start towards our goals over a 5-year period. And I really want to thank all of our partners for all of their efforts. Your question is how do we turn these pledges into reality? And what we will do, we also have to increase the pledges over the coming years. The job is not done today, and that's a very important point. We will continue to be in touch with all of the governments that are here, their ministries, their heads of state when we're able to visit with them, the heads of the organizations, and continue to make the case and check up on whether or not governments, partners, everybody are fulfilling their commitments. And we'll talk about that with them, because we want to reach our goal over time. It is, yes, 20 million girls who will never return to school, but there are hundreds of millions or tens of millions of children who are not in school. There are millions of children who aren't learning enough in school, and we need this money and this investment and this commitment and this political will to advance education globally. And that's why the work doesn't stop today. The work will continue. the work continues after today.
Okay, we've moved from the Millennium Development Goal to the Sustainable Development Goal, of course.
Yes.
And still yet, there is slow progress, especially for girls' education and for poor or working class people across the world. What are you going to do to make sure governments across the world recognize that this is a crisis?
So a number of things. First of all, we are a partnership that includes, at the moment, between 65 and 70 developing country partner governments. So our partnership, so the governments are our partnership. They're a huge part of our partnership. They're on our board. We work with them in many, many different respects, technically, policy issues, etc. So we are in touch on a regular basis. Everybody monitors the data of how it's going of each other. And so there's a sense of what we call mutual accountability for everybody that's made a commitment of some kind to whether or not that will happen. You mentioned the MDGs and the shift to the SDGs. The two biggest changes between the MDGs and the SDGs was the addition of quality education and the addition of equitable education. Not just starting school, but you have to finish school and you have to learn something along the way. And so we are continuing to build the monitoring and evaluation tools that we need to check up on what has become a much more complex set of goals. So we all work together, we all hold each other accountable through our board, and we look at the figures and check up on how everyone else is doing. It is a mutual accountability amongst everybody that is part of the partnership. Donors, countries, everybody.
It's been fantastic. I think having countries in the north and the south, east, west, all around the world coming to raising the largest amounts of money ever for global education is really great. And the knowledge sharing that's happening, ministers from the UK, the Sierra Leone, Malawi, Pakistan, Afghanistan, exchanging ideas is really wonderful. And I think the world needs this.
We've seen so many ministers here, like yourself today, being here, and presidents, of course, and they are all pledging to invest more in education. How realistic is that, knowing that there have been so many pledges and the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, has kind of affected the education system and there are so many global challenges?
I think we remain really positive about the government's pledges for education. And I think those pledges are essential because when you commit, when you pledge, then you're not just going to make a bogus pledge. And for Sierra Leone, we're pledging that will keep our budget at 22% for education, which is where we are, and it's really important that governments can make a stake, declare what they're going to do for their children of their countries and for the world, and then do it.
Speaking of Sierra Leone, the inequality gap between girls' education and boys' education is very huge. Likewise, in many parts of Africa. What do you think Sierra Leone as a country or African governments needs to do in order to bridge those gaps?
One of the things that this conference is talking about is girls' education and domestic financing. And Sierra Leone is doing really well in both of those areas. I mean, if you look at gender parity numbers, we're at 0.8 in 2017. And today we're at 0.94. We have gender parity from pre-primary all the way to junior secondary school in Sierra Leone. And we're hoping to achieve gender parity by 2025. And that's a commitment that we have. And if we have gender parity, more girls enrolling, more girls staying in school, more girls being safe in school, then it becomes something that we can try to maintain and ensure remains.
We've seen over the last couple of years, the president has introduced rigorous policies, especially the one where girls, even if they are pregnant, they are still allowed to go to school. And that has been, I wouldn't say a success, but that has been welcome in many parts of Sierra Leone. But yet, critics are still saying there is still a lot more to do. And looking at the free education that was introduced 3 years ago, yes, it is free, but critics are still saying that the education, there is not much of a quality on it.
Sure.
Also, none of the ministers or none of Sierra Leone's government's children goes to those schools. So what would be your response to that?
You know, I think about education as you're building a skyscraper. When you build a skyscraper, you don't just come and put the skyscraper on, it will fall. You want to focus on building the foundation, go dig deeper, strengthen it, make sure that it's large enough, that's robust enough, that you can put 10-story, 50-story, 100-story helipad when you want. What we are doing is building the foundation such that we can build a skyscraper, and we are putting that and beginning to come one roof at a time, one layer at a time. And that's what we are committed to doing. No country, nobody can say, oh, you have achieved quality. Quality is not a single threshold. Quality is about going up, quality is about progress, quality is about a movement. And that's what we really remain committed to. So critics have a right to be there, but cynics, I don't have time for cynics, because I'd rather you come and join me in the ring and change it. We know it's bad. We know the quality is bad. We know that girls need education. So I'd rather you come and join me. One comes and joins me. So how do we improve it? I see you on a positive track. How do we make sure that we achieve whatever you feel comfortable with?
And finally, from me, over the last 3 years, since the new direction came into power, their pledge has been to sell Sierra Leone in a very positive manner. And I bet you will know more than I do that over the last 3 decades, Sierra Leone has been popular for all the negative reasons. What do you think you need to do as a government in order to change that narrative? That's one. Yeah. And we as Sierra Leoneans, or people as Sierra Leoneans, what role do they need to play as well in order for that to continue?
I think you're right that Sierra Leone is known historically for negative things, but when you have the education summit and the 10 countries who are there, one of them is Sierra Leone, but the countries that are put on stage that are engaging severally as Sierra Leone, we begin to change the narrative. Now when you think about education for Sierra Leone, we're known for radical inclusion, we're known for the use of data, we're known for evidence-based policies, we're known for adding 800,000 people to our education system. We need to do that consistently, and then we need to be proud and represent that as well. Because there are challenges, and we're not saying there are no challenges. We're not trying to be perfect. We're trying to continue improving every day, and that's our commitment.
Yeah, it's an excellent event. Anything that is, providing greater access to education for especially the young in developing countries, and and also for girl education. We feel it's excellent.
We've seen so many pledges here today by ministers and governments from various countries. Pledging is one thing, but fulfilling the pledges is another thing. How challenging do you think this is going to be, and how realistic are these pledges?
Yeah, I think that, it's a question of priorities, and I think that, one of the things that this event will have is to sensitize and to get governments to prioritize education. So it's a question of allocation of resources. And, and I think that's, once the political will is there, then it's absolutely possible to put the money where the mouth is.
I know you're not the education minister, but the foreign minister. But over the last 18 months, we've seen COVID has affected countries globally. How has this affected Nigeria, and what is Nigeria doing in order to combat COVID and also to make sure young kids get the basic education that they need, and the gender equality, the gap is reduced?
Yes, of course, we have a program, in Nigeria to now use platforms, internet platforms, and get and develop that as a viable way and sustainable way of delivering education. And we have had good uptake on that. And so that's how we've been able to, keep the children, male and female, engaged and educated throughout this process. Of course, COVID is a huge challenge, but we all have to also develop and be imaginative, new ways of addressing the situation, so that the economies don't collapse and you don't have a social catastrophe in the countries. And we've been doing very well. The Nigerian numbers also in COVID, our response has been very effective.
Yeah, but I'm not here alone. You have seen heads of state, other ministers, ambassadors, philanthropists. You have seen representative of government of the Western world. You have seen the European Union, etc., etc. So we are all gathered here for one objective, and that objective is to support the education system in least developed member countries. So that is important because we know that education is at the center, is the centerpiece of economic and social development. If we fail the education system, if we fail to train, to educate our children today, we will be failing our countries tomorrow. So it is important that we all come together, to work together, and to support that education system that will prepare us, prepare our children for the world of tomorrow.
Speaking of failing our children, over the last 18 months, COVID has had a major impact globally, be it in the economy or in the education system. What impact has COVID really had on Guinea in terms of education-wise? And as a minister, what do you think your government will be doing to minimize the impact?
Listen, when the COVID came, everybody thought it was a health issue. So everybody rallied about that cry. It's a health issue. And then we found out it was more than a health issue, it's an economic issue, because a lot of parents, a lot of families were out of jobs. And then we found out more than health and economic issue, it's an educational problem, because all those children were sitting at home, being idle, doing absolutely nothing. So in particular of Guinea, the COVID has done great damage, because we had more than 14,000 schools that were closed. We have more than 3 million children that were at home, in addition to about 1.5 million kids that are out of school. So you see the magnitude of the impact of the COVID. Yes, initially, like any other country, we were not prepared to face this challenge, but the government rallied quickly to find ways and means to train those children. So we used digital learning, we used radio, we used television, and thanks to GPE, actually, who provided $7 million to UNICEF, we had later on a safe opening our schools. And we had some programs, a digital program, that can help the kids staying at home to learn. So all in all, we are learning. We were not the only one challenged by the COVID, even in the Western world, because particularly on the digital divide, not every city in our country has internet, but you need to have internet to have access to digital online learning. But that has given us a wake-up call, and right now the government is getting ready to make sure that all children, regardless where they are, how they are, at which level they are, they have access to good quality education.
Of course, the funding from the Global Partnership Education has had a major impact, just as you've said. But looking at it in a wider context, Guinea, like many other African countries, has got a very big inequality gap between girls and boys. What do you think as African government or as a minister of Guinea that Guinea needs to do or other African leaders should do to close that gap?
I think we have heard today voices from all walks of life. We have voices from our leaders, we have heard voices from the youth, and what I take from that and from my personal experience, it is important that our girls remain in school. It's important that our girls are engaged, because you cannot build a nation without having half of its population, for instance in Guinea more than 50% are women. You cannot have more than half of your population out of the system. So you need to educate them. You need to make sure they are part of the workforce. You need to make sure that these are the head of family. We are all coming from women. We have our mothers, we have our sisters, we have our daughters. So we have to make sure they participate in the economic development process in our countries.
We come to an end of a unique campaign and summit. And this event, I do believe, will be an event that will bend the curve of history towards a more inclusive and shared, prosperous future. I have no doubt that this summit will go down in history as a watershed moment, a moment when nations came together to avert an education catastrophe that would have set us back significantly. All the gains that we have made over the past decades. I am indeed proud to have co-hosted this historic GPE replenishment campaign together with Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And today, as we have just heard, we not only raise our hands in support to education, but we also walk with our heads held high, confident that we will indeed reach our target of raising $5 billion for education by 2025. Congratulations to you all. Well done. Thank you very much. These resources will provide catalytic support to get more than 175 million boys and girls in school. It will help to enroll 88 million more children in school, including 46 million more girls, and also protect 2 million girls from child marriages, essentially helping us to deliver on the promise of education as a social economic development. We have reason to celebrate this afternoon, for this summit marks an important milestone in our collective efforts to support education systems globally. The world has come together to demonstrate the power of unity, the power of holding hands, or in our case, raising hands, towards a shared global objective to rebuild stronger, strengthen, and to transform education systems and reimagine the future together. I want to thank the Global Partnership for Education, led by our dear friend, former Prime Minister Gillard, a partnership that has provided a platform to strengthen education systems and to improve education outcomes for all children across the globe. The GPE role remains central as we work towards rebuilding and strengthening education systems globally, as we reimagine education, as we build on lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, strengthen the quality of our education systems, and strive to achieve inclusiveness in access to education. I would also like to thank our GPE donor countries and partners for ensuring GPE is sufficiently funded, even in the face of economic contraction. Your investment demonstrates great foresight that recognizes the fundamental role of education in a shared future. To my fellow developing country partners, I am proud that we have remained unshaken in our dedication to finance education for future generations despite the tough economic situation. I want to thank all countries that have endorsed the 2021 call for action on domestic education financing, and indeed those that have endorsed and actioned the statement also in the near future. These endorsements are a critical step towards being the masters of our own destiny, driving the change that we want to see for our respective countries. Let us keep investing in education through increased domestic resource allocation, and let us continue to enact policies that support the education sector and strive to adopt digital learning technologies in our schools. And let us ensure that all our girls get an equal opportunity to learn for the benefit of our common future. Let us remember that even though money is necessary for transforming our education systems, it alone is not sufficient. A deliberate, committed drive towards ensuring that each dollar investment impacts quality and holistic education for our children is equally as vital. Kenya is proud to be leading the way into the resolve to deliver more and better domestic resources towards education. Kenya, and as we have heard, 18 other countries have already endorsed the 2021 call to action on domestic financing and actioned its recommendation by dedicating 26% of our national budgets to the education sector. I want to encourage all countries to do so, so that while prioritizing the principle of volume, equity, and efficiency, we continue to put education forward. Quality education systems cannot be realized without enhanced domestic finance, and the focus, therefore, is on governments to deliver unequivocally on this mandate. Let me also say that one of my favorite moments during the duration of this campaign was our virtual school tour that I held with Prime Minister Boris Johnson, where it gave me great and immense joy to see children back in school after nearly 1 year of school closures. And it was also exciting to witness the power of digital technology as our Kenyan children engage with their peers here in the United Kingdom. I envision a future where such engagements are not going to be the exception, but the rule. A learning experience that embraces technology and harnesses it to its full power. We imagine a world where every child has access to digital technology as a tool to learn as much as they wish and to experience the world from the comfort of their classrooms or their homes. And that is why one of my main messages throughout this campaign has been the advancement of EdTech through scaling up investments and efforts towards digitized learning. Empirical evidences abound, demonstrating that increased school connectivity yields long-run social economic benefits. Indeed, as reported, a 10% increase in school connectivity can increase the effective years of school for a child by 0.6% and increase our GDPs per capita by 1.1%. Given that schools serve as community assets, greater economic benefits also accrue for the local community, broadening the social impact of such technology. It is a fact that much of the responsibility to advance education systems lies with governments. But it is also a fact that there are quite a good number of non-governmental actors who have and continue to play a critical role complementing government efforts in advancing education, and I would like to take some time to acknowledge them. From the multilaterals that continue to work hand in hand with governments to strengthen investment in education, to civil society who carry out sustained advocacy and direct investments in education, as well as the private sector who are playing an increasing role in supporting global education, and lastly to our youth leaders who continue to demonstrate admirable leadership and dedication towards advancing the education agenda. You all remain key partners on this journey, and I encourage each and every one of you to sustain your support as we strive to achieve our SDG 4. Lastly, I would like to convey my utmost gratitude to all the silent heroes over the last year and a half, our teachers, for their dedicated efforts in helping our children shape their future, and particularly in supporting learners during this pandemic. Your devotion has been tested, but you have remained committed and resilient in the face of unparalleled challenges. On behalf of everyone here, and especially on behalf of the most important constituency who are sitting behind our gathering, that of our children, I want to say simply thank you to all our teachers. As we travel back to our respective countries, my request to each and every one of you is to sustain action towards achieving the goal that has brought us here today. We are at an inflection point, which requires targeted, urgent, and sustained interventions. The actions that we take henceforth have the power to transform lives, and that is, ladies and gentlemen, a chance that we simply cannot afford to lose. A bountiful harvest awaits us all if our nations continue to prioritize education. I want to thank you all once again, and it is indeed my great pleasure now to welcome my good friend and partner, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, to give his address. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Uhuru. Thank you, Julia. And congratulations to you all. Great to see you in person, by the way. Isn't it wonderful that the vaccines have liberated us to be able to come to this conference in London? A wonderful thing. Great to see you all, despite your masks. I see some familiar friends, but in spite of the masks, someone taking your masks off in a daring way. But that's absolutely fine. Whereas you're socially distanced. Now, listen, everybody. I want to thank you all for raising your hands and then raising your hands high and then thrusting them deep into your pockets in the way that you had, and producing this staggering sum of $4 billion going on for $5 billion. Now, we often go to summits, or we did before COVID struck, and we would hear lots of, hi, Helen, very good to see you in the front row. We'd hear very often men in suits, let's be clear, men in suits of middle years, basically saying that there was a problem before humanity that was so big and so intractable that there was no silver bullet, no quick fix, no simplistic solution. Have you ever been at a meeting like that? Well, this is not that meeting. I want to tell you, this GPE, this Global Partner for Education meeting is completely different, because this is the silver bullet. This is the magic potion. This is the panacea. This is the universal cure. This is the Swiss Army knife, complete with Allen key and screwdriver and everything else, that can solve virtually every problem that afflicts humanity. And I'm absolutely serious. If you educate the world, then of course, educate the world properly, educate the world fairly, then of course you end a great natural injustice. But you also, and if you end the injustice that 9 out of 10 people, 9 out of 10 10-year-olds cannot read a story around the country. 132 million kids aren't in school. Or in many of the countries represented here, alas, there are too few girls in school, and there is a gross disparity in the education of boys and girls. And if you end that injustice, and you give every girl in the world the same education as every boy, 12 years of quality education, then you perform the most fantastic benefits for humanity. You lift life expectancy, you lift per capita GDP, you deal with infant mortality, and if you educate people properly in the way that they deserve, then of course you end, or you help to end, all kinds of ignorance and prejudice. And you end also, by educating people, you help to end all the things that ignorance and prejudice helps to create. So you deal with terrorism and with war and extremism, and you help people to tackle climate change. And so I'm immensely proud of the achievements of this GPE summit today. I'm proud of what the UK has been able to contribute in spite of the difficult financial circumstances that we're all going through. We have lashed out 430 billion pounds, 430 million pounds, still a hell of a lot. 430 million pounds, as Julia rightly points out, the biggest sum that we've ever contributed. And I'm proud of the work that we do around the world, helping to educate young people across our planet. Giving lessons in Hausa on the radio in Nigeria. I think amazing to see what we do in South Asia, teaching young girls in schools. And I know, as Uhuru has said, that this pandemic has made things more difficult. And we've lost ground. And we all know the risk that inequality will now be entrenched. But now is the time to make up that ground. And necessity has been the mother of invention. We've all learned how to cope with Zoom, some of us better than others. I imagine, I don't know whether you agree, but I think the younger generation probably are getting the hang of this electronic technology, perhaps even better than some of us here in this room. And they understand how to impart and imbibe information through the internet. And I think we've got to make sure that we support through our GP, as Uhuru was saying, we support EdTech, we support the technical progress that we can make through laptops, through devices of all kinds. We should support the creation of infrastructure of classrooms. Of course, that's the right thing to do. But never forget fundamentally what this is all about. What is education? An abstract noun. Education is the imparting of knowledge, of instruction by one human being to another. And the people we really need to thank and the people we really need to think about are the teachers across the world. The teachers across the world who make it, or everybody in this room will probably have somebody that you can think of was the teacher who made a difference to your life, who encouraged you, who gave you confidence. Can you think of one, Julia? Mr. Crow, there you go. Well, Julia would not be here without Mr. Crow. Let's hear it from Mr. Crow. Uhuru, I seem to remember. Do you remember when we did that lesson with your pupils in Nairobi? What was the name of the Mrs. Simpson, Mrs. Roos, and she taught you mathematics. That's right. Well, Uhuru would not be the brilliant president of Kenya without Mrs. Roos, who taught him mathematics. And I owe a lot to all my teachers, but I think in particular of a guy called Mr. Fox when I was about 10 years old, and he took me into the library, and I don't know whether he thought I was in need of remedial help or whether he thought I had potential. It was never clear to me, but he said, I want you to read these books, and it made a fantastic difference and a lasting difference to my life. So I just want to say that the best thing about this summit here today is that we are supporting with huge injections of cash those amazing people across the world who are inspiring young people to think that they can succeed, and they can succeed. And by the way, let me give you one idea. Someone somewhere, some child somewhere who is being supported by the $4 or $5 billion. What is it? Is it either 4? We seem to some dad by this. It's 4 going on 5, right? Over $4 billion. It's going to be $5 billion over 5 years, right? It's going to be right. That's right. It's a huge sum of money. Some child somewhere may well be the one who goes on to develop the next vaccine to deal with cancer or whatever other problem afflicts humanity. Some kid around the world will, I have absolutely no doubt, have their lives transformed, and many, many kids will have their lives transformed by these funds. And that is the objective, to unleash potential across the planet. It's a fantastic thing that you've done. I'm very, very proud that the UK has been able to be part of it, and with Uhuru, with Julia, to offer leadership. And I just want to say to you all, thank you very, very much for coming to London. Thank you for supporting the GPE. Thank you for digging so deep into your pockets. And thank you for investing in education of young people, of children across our planet. It's the single best investment we can make in the future of humanity. Thank you all.
Well, as you can see now, this place is now empty. And of course, the summit has ended. Of course, today's summit was hosted by the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and also the President of Kenya, President Uhuru Kenyatta. Today's event has been dubbed as a very, very successful one, as they have been able to raise millions of dollars to help developing countries to sustain or to invest more on education, and most especially on girls' education, because the gender parity between girls and boys in developing countries is still very, very high. And the aim is to reduce that gap in the next 5 years. Thank you for watching, and do join us again when you can. Baillor Jalloh, African Voices Platform.
Raise our hands for education.
Raise your hand. Raise your hand now. We got a real reason to celebrate and anticipate. Every day we're walking away to freedom. We're not gonna wait, not gonna wait. So we don't ever wait. wasting no time. And we're not gonna change our mind. I know I can make something of my life, yeah. I know I can reach the heights of high.
Raise your hand, with the future you need. Raise your hand.
Raise your hand, yeah, 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 yeah.
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand,
Make the change that you need. Raise your hand.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, 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 yeah. Anything you do, make sure you do it right. And together we can help to find the light. And together we can help to find the light. We can shine the light. Oh, oh, yeah. Hola, hola, hola. Skipingele la bomba, bakula bomba. Skipingele la bomba, se cante. You drink over, village, raise your hand.
Come on.
Feel the future. Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Change the future.
Boom, Joe, come on, let's go.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. When we raise our hands, it is to touch the sun. When we raise our hands, it is to reach the highest.
Education for all.
Education for all. Education for all.
That's right, come on, you can clap your hands now. Let's go. Raise your hand.
Raise your hand.
Come on now.
Build the future you need. Raise your hand.
Everybody in the room, raise your hand. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand.
Make the change that
Make
you
the
need.
change.
Raise your hand.
Yeah.
Raise your hand. Build the future you need. Raise your hand.
Raise your hand, raise your hand. We are making this
Raise
commitment.
your hand.
Raise your hand.
Make the change that you need. Raise your hand.